A surprising twist in Canada's pipeline debate emerged on January 21, 2025, when Alberta Premier Danielle Smith called for a revival of the Northern Gateway pipeline. Unexpectedly, Grand Chief Stewart Phillip, president of the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs, voiced support, warning that if Canada doesn't act, Donald Trump will. Yet just a day later, Phillip abruptly retracted his statement, raising fresh questions about external influence and the future of Indigenous participation in energy development. Northern Gateway, a pipeline once proposed to carry Alberta oil sands crude to the British Columbia coast for export to Asia, was cancelled in 2016 after years of environmental opposition and legal challenges. Its demise became a symbol of Canada's broader struggles to balance resource development, environmental concerns, and Indigenous rights. Now, amid rising global energy demand and growing Indigenous interest in ownership stakes, calls to revive the project have resurfaced. Adding to the intrigue, Phillip has long been a vocal critic of major resource projects, including Northern Gateway, making his initial endorsement all the more surprising. Helin, a member of the Tsimshian Nation and principal at IN Site Advisors, sees deeper forces at work. The lawyer and best-selling author believes the incident highlights how environmental activists are shaping the conversation. Environmental groups have infiltrated some Indigenous organizations. They supported a government that championed their agendas, like the Northern BC coastal pipeline ban and changes to the regulatory approval system. In this era of Trump, all they've managed to do is weaken Canada's position. Nonetheless, Helin says the energy industry has learned the importance of genuine engagement with Indigenous interests, and that Indigenous leaders increasingly support responsible natural resource development. He argues that inclusion and recognition are essential going forward. Indigenous leader Dale Swampy established the Northern Gateway Aboriginal Equity Partners. After the project was cancelled, he formed the National Coalition of Chiefs, an alliance of First Nation chiefs advocating for oil and gas development in their communities. Swampy still champions the idea of a pipeline dedicated solely to moving bitumen to the coast, arguing that Canada has been putting all its eggs in one basket by selling almost exclusively to the United States. Swampy wants Northern Gateway revived with an Indigenous equity investment. He says oil tankers must be allowed back on the northern coast, and Canada needs more fluid regulatory processes, so projects can be built on budget under a reasonable timeline. Swampy says that Indigenous leaders increasingly recognize the benefits of collaborating on resource development in mining or liquefied natural gas projects. Helin, Swampy, and other Indigenous leaders recommend 6 policies. 1. Repeal Bill C-69, the Impact Assessment Act, which blocks pipelines, mines, refineries, export plants, and other energy infrastructure in which First Nations want to invest. The Supreme Court of Canada ruled it unconstitutional on October 13, 2023. 2. Cut taxes on carbon, energy, and investment projects. This can neutralize tariff impacts and attract new investment. 3. Repeal Bill C-59, the so-called greenwashing bill. According to Stephen Buffalo, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Indian Resource Council of Canada, this legislation has silenced many voices within the Indigenous energy community. 4. Approve LNG plants and related infrastructure. Canada currently sells gas exports almost exclusively to the United States, but there's a strong business case for expanding to Asian and European markets. In a recent Canadian Energy Ventures webcast, it was revealed that LNG sold to Europe fetches up to 16 times the price Canada receives from U.S. sales. First Nations are already successfully involved in wood fiber LNG, cedar LNG, and Casey Lassime's LNG in BC. 5. Cut regulatory delays. Prolonged approval timelines erode investor confidence. Streamlining processes can help projects proceed in reasonable timeframes. 6. Clarify reconciliation guidelines. Clearly define what constitutes meaningful consultation. Industry must treat Indigenous peoples as true partners, advancing economic reconciliation through equity partnerships. A social media stir over Northern Gateway has reignited debate over Indigenous ownership in Canada's energy future. While some leaders waver, others like Helin and Swampy make a compelling case. Indigenous-led projects are crucial for Canada's economic and energy security. Their message is clear: repeal restrictive policies, accelerate project approvals, and embrace Indigenous equity. If Ottawa removes the roadblocks, Canada can unlock its full energy potential.